The twin sons of Arkal burned above the blood-soaked sands, casting long, jagged shadows across the open arena. Hundreds of alien spectators filled the stone terraces, roaring and stamping their feet in wild excitement. In the center of it all stood Kaara, the pride of the Arkal, their undefeated warrior princess. Her dark crimson skin was slick with sweat, and her armored gauntlets gleamed under the harsh light. Around her lay 3 unconscious challengers, all larger, stronger than any human, and all utterly defeated. The chieftain, her father, sat atop a throne of bones, his voice booming across the arena. "Is there no being among you brave enough to claim my daughter? No warrior bold enough to match her strength?" Silence fell. The Arkal were a race of conquerors, brutal and proud, and even they hesitated. For months, suitors from across the galaxies had come, drawn by the promise of Kaara's hand and the alliance it represented. Every single one had been crushed, humiliated before the tribe. Now, few dared even step forward. From the crowd, a small ripple of movement. Heads turned. Whispers spread like fire. A human? He was not impressive to look at. Average height by human standards, perhaps shorter than most Arkal males. He wore no armor, just a worn leather jacket and simple trousers. No visible weapons. His expression was calm, almost bored, as he made his way to the center of the arena. Kaara's lips curled into a smirk. She raised one eyebrow at her father, who merely gestured for the challenge to proceed. "You are either very brave," Kaara called out, her voice a sharp growl, "or very stupid." The human shrugged. "Maybe both." Laughter rippled through the audience. A few Arkal clutched their sides in amusement. The idea that a human, a soft, delicate creature, could stand against Kaara was absurd. But tradition demanded the trial proceed. The chieftain stood, raising a ceremonial axe. "Begin." Kaara lunged without hesitation, moving with the brutal speed that had shattered so many before. Her fist swung out like a hammer meant to crush bone and pride alike. But the human wasn't there. He stepped aside with almost casual ease, letting her momentum carry her past him. Kaara snarled and twisted, launching a backhanded strike. Again, he slipped away, moving just out of reach, his boots kicking up dust. The crowd grew restless. This wasn't a fight, it was a dance. Kaara roared in frustration and pressed the attack harder. She swung fists, elbows, knees. Every move a deadly strike, every blow fueled by raw power. And every time, the human was just one step beyond her reach. He wasn't stronger. He wasn't faster. But he was untouchable. Minutes dragged by. Kaara's breathing grew heavier. Her movements lost a fraction of their sharpness. The human waited. When she finally overextended, the human moved. In a blur, he sidestepped her strike, grabbed her wrist, and used her own momentum to flip her over his shoulder. She slammed into the sand, stunned. The arena went silent. Kaara surged back to her feet with a snarl, but the human was already moving again, dodging, weaving, tapping her armor here and there, each touch throwing off her balance. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He was dismantling her, piece by piece. The wild warrior who had broken champions now found herself struggling against a ghost. Frustration turned to fury. Fury turned to desperation. And still, he waited. Finally, panting, sweat dripping from her brow, Kaara staggered. She raised her fists, but they trembled. Her legs felt like stone. Every breath was a battle. The human stepped in close. He tapped her chest lightly with 2 fingers. Kaara collapsed to her knees. The crowd erupted, not in laughter, not in mockery, but in stunned, almost reverent silence. The chieftain rose, his face a mask of disbelief. The human extended a hand to Kaara. No words, no demand for victory, just an offer. Kaara stared at him, breathing hard. For the first time in her life, she had been defeated, not by brute force, but by something far more dangerous. Patience, precision, control. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she took his hand. He pulled her gently to her feet. She towered over him, fierce and wild, but something inside her had shifted. Respect, curiosity, maybe even something more dangerous. The human gave a small nod and stepped back. The chieftain's voice broke the silence. "Name yourself, human." The human smiled slightly. "Call me Jack." The chieftain stared at him for a long moment, then let out a booming laugh that echoed across the arena. Then rise, Jack of Earth. You have bested my daughter, and by our laws, she is yours." The crowd cheered, stamping their feet in a rhythmic thunder that shook the very ground. Kaara stood beside Jack, still breathing hard, still burning with the fire of battle. But now her gaze was different, not filled with anger, filled with challenge. Jack looked up at her and smiled again. This, he thought, was only the beginning. The celebrations that followed were wild and chaotic, the kind only the Arcal could throw. Fires blazed high into the night sky, warriors clashed in friendly duels, and barrels of potent drink were passed around with reckless abandon. Jack sat quietly by one of the fires, sipping cautiously from a crude metal mug, watching the revelry with calm detachment. Across from him, Kaara sat rigidly, arms crossed, her piercing eyes locked onto him like a predator studying an unknown creature. She hadn't spoken a word since the duel ended. Not during the ritual binding ceremony, not when the chieftain declared them bonded by right of combat, and not even now as the entire tribe celebrated their union. Jack didn't mind. He understood her silence. For someone like Kaara, losing wasn't just a matter of pride. It was a deep, personal wound. Several warriors approached him during the night, some to offer congratulations, others to challenge him to arm wrestling matches, drinking contests, or absurd feats of strength. Jack deflected them all with polite smiles and subtle maneuvering, careful not to insult, but equally careful not to get pulled into another spectacle. He hadn't come here looking for fame. He came here because he needed allies. Real ones. When the fires began to die down and most of the tribe either passed out or wandered back to their tents, Kaara finally spoke. "You fight like a coward." Jack glanced at her, unbothered. "I fight to win." She snorted, an almost amused sound. "You dodged. You tricked me. You didn't even hit me properly. And yet," he said, tilting his head, "here we are." Her fists clenched, but she didn't argue. Instead, she stood and gestured for him to follow. Wordlessly, she led him away from the dying campfires and into the rocky outcroppings that surrounded the village. Jack followed without hesitation, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. They reached a flat plateau overlooking the vast desert. The stars above burned cold and brilliant, a million points of light untouched by the pollution of civilization. Kaara turned to face him, her body taut with suppressed emotion. "You think you own me?" she demanded. Jack shook his head. "I don't own anyone. You beat me. You claimed me." She spat the words like venom. "I accepted your father's terms," Jack said calmly. "I didn't claim you. I accepted the alliance your people demanded." Kaara frowned, her fists relaxing slightly. "Alliance?" Jack nodded, stepping closer. "The galaxy's about to change, Kaara. Big players are moving. Empires rising. Others falling. I need warriors who aren't afraid to fight. Warriors who understand strength. Your people fit that better than anyone." "You mean you didn't come here just to win me?" There was a flash of something in her voice, suspicion, confusion, maybe even disappointment. Jack smiled faintly. "You're impressive. No denying that. But no, I came for your people. You're just an unexpected bonus." Kaara blinked, caught off guard by his honesty. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came. Jack turned and looked out over the desert, his voice quiet. "Your tribe has survived for generations by being the strongest. But strength alone won't be enough soon. The threats coming, they don't fight fair. They don't fight honorably. They wipe out entire worlds without warning. If you want your people to survive, you're going to need more than strength. You'll need strategy, precision." Kaara followed his gaze, her own expression hardening. She knew he wasn't lying. The Arcal prided themselves on physical might, but they were not fools. Rumors had been spreading for months. Rumors of worlds burning, of ancient empires crushed underfoot by unseen forces. "You think you can teach us?" she asked after a long moment. Jack shrugged. "I can show you a different way. It's up to you whether you listen." They stood there in silence, the cool desert wind tugging at their clothes, the stars wheeling overhead. Finally, Kaara extended her hand, the same hand she had tried to break him with earlier. "Then show me, Jack of Earth," she said, a fierce smile tugging at her lips. "Show me how a human fights a war." Jack took her hand, gripping it firmly. In that moment, something shifted between them. No longer enemies. Not yet partners. Something in between. Something dangerous. They returned to the village just before dawn. Jack wasted no time. He began working with the warriors, not by challenging their strength, but by teaching them small things. How to read an enemy's movements. How to use terrain to their advantage. How to fight as a unit rather than as individuals seeking glory. It was slow going. The AR-Cal were proud and stubborn. Many mocked his methods at first, but Kaara watched everything with sharp, calculating eyes. She trained harder than anyone, pushing herself beyond her limits, and gradually, others followed her lead. Within weeks, the AR-Cal warriors fought differently. Smarter, more precise, still brutal, but now deadly in ways that frightened even their own elders. Jack introduced new tactics, taught them how to build traps, how to fight in formation, how to strike at weaknesses rather than charging blindly into battle. He showed them how small units could bring down larger foes. How victory wasn't about strength alone, but about making the enemy believe they had already lost. Through it all, Kaara stayed by his side, sometimes challenging him, sometimes surprising him with her own cunning insights. They fought together in mock battles, argued fiercely over strategies, and slowly, an unspoken bond grew between them. One evening, as they sat overlooking the desert once more, Kaara nudged him with her shoulder. "You're not what I expected," she said. Jack chuckled. "Neither are you." She grinned, a sharp, wicked thing, and for the first time, Jack saw something he hadn't expected either: affection. The night stretched on, filled with promises of wars to come, alliances to forge, and perhaps something even more dangerous between them. Because sometimes, the fiercest warriors aren't the ones who fight with their fists. Sometimes, the fiercest warriors are the ones who change your heart. War came faster than Jack had predicted. A scouting party returned bloodied and battered, speaking of an army moving through the northern territories. They described war machines unlike anything the AR-Cal had ever seen. Massive armored beasts spewing fire and smoke, grinding entire villages to dust under their treads. The elders panicked, calling for immediate retreat into the desert's heart where few dared to follow. But Jack stood firm. Retreat would mean death by starvation or slow destruction. Fighting was the only choice. Fighting smart. Jack gathered the warriors on the same plateau where he first spoke with Kaara. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the rising fear. "They believe you're savages," Jack said. "They think you'll rush at them like beasts. Prove them wrong. Show them what they fear most: minds sharpened by survival, hands guided by strategy." He mapped out a plan on the dusty ground. Guerrilla strikes, hit-and-run ambushes, traps and sabotage. It was a kind of war the AR-Cal had never fought, but desperation gave birth to willingness. Kaara stood beside him, her expression fierce. Where once she had mocked his tactics, now she defended them, arguing with elders who hesitated. Her voice carried weight. She was still the strongest warrior among them, and now she was Jack's fiercest supporter. When the enemy finally came, they found not a chaotic mob of screaming barbarians, but ghosts. Shadows that struck from nowhere, crippled their machines, and vanished before they could respond. A convoy moving through a narrow pass found boulders raining down upon them. Foot soldiers advancing through the canyons were picked off one by hidden archers. Supply lines were severed under the cover of night. Fear began to spread through the invading army. The AR-Cal had always been terrifying in close combat. Now, they were something worse. They were unpredictable. In one particularly daring raid, Jack led a team, including Kaara, straight into the enemy's forward command camp. Under the cover of darkness and distraction fires, they slipped through the perimeter, took out key officers, and vanished before alarm could fully spread. By dawn, the enemy leadership was in disarray. Orders conflicted, morale crumbled, and units moved without coordination. Jack exploited every weakness, turning the invaders' superior numbers into a liability. Kaara fought like a storm, swift and merciless. She had always been a terror with a blade, but now she wielded cunning as deftly as her strength. Jack fought beside her, not commanding from behind, but standing shoulder to shoulder. They became a symbol to the AR-Cal, strength and strategy united. Weeks of constant harassment took their toll. What was once a proud, unstoppable army began retreating. Jack knew better than to chase them in open battle. Instead, he let the desert finish them. Water supplies poisoned, safe paths mapped with traps. Every day, fewer and fewer of the invaders survived. Victory didn't come with a single grand battle. It came with exhaustion, fear, and the slow collapse of enemy will. When the last remnants of the enemy army fled back across the desert, broken and humiliated, the Arcal erupted in a celebration so wild it shook the very ground. Songs were sung of Jack the human, the small man who fought with the mind of a wolf and the heart of a lion. Later, as the fires roared and drums thundered, Kaara found Jack standing alone at the edge of the camp, looking up at the stars. "You did it," she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard. Jack smiled without looking at her. "We did it." Kaara stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her presence like a heat against his back. "I misjudged you," she admitted. Jack finally turned, meeting her eyes. "You were supposed to." They stood there, the sounds of celebration washing over them, a strange tension lingering between them. Not the tension of battle or distrust, but something newer, sharper. "You could leave now," Kaara said. "You've proven yourself. You don't owe us anything." Jack thought about it. About Earth. About the galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos. He thought about the tribe he had come to respect and the warrior who had come to mean more to him than he had expected. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Kaara's grin was fierce and brilliant. "Good." The desert wind carried their laughter into the night, as two warriors who had started as enemies now faced the future as something much more dangerous together. Because true strength wasn't just about muscle or weapons. It was about who stood with you when the dust finally settled. Months passed. Jack had become more than a warrior to the Arcal. He was a symbol now, a rallying figure that united the splintered tribes. His strategies had been taught to every village, passed like sacred knowledge. Even the most stubborn of warriors began adopting human ideas of warfare, adding their own brutal flair. But peace was a fragile thing. News came one night on the back of a broken messenger. A new enemy approached, one far greater than the first. Not a kingdom, but an empire. Not soldiers seeking land, but crusaders seeking conquest. They were not coming to punish the Arcal. They were coming to wipe them from existence. Jack sat with the council as the grim news spread. The elders whispered of retreat, of surrender. Some even spoke of submission, hoping to spare their families. Kaara stood without hesitation. "Let them come. We will break them." Her words fired something inside the gathered leaders. They looked to Jack, waiting. He rose slowly, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes. "You're no longer a scattered people," he said. "You're a storm. If they think they can extinguish you, let them try. We won't just survive. We'll make them regret the day they set foot on your sand." Preparation began at once. Villages united under Jack's guidance. Defenses were reinforced. New traps, deadlier and more clever, were laid out across the desert paths. Warriors trained day and night, merging the Arcal's savage strength with human tactical discipline. Kaara was always by Jack's side, matching him plan for plan, idea for idea. Their bond had grown into something unspoken but undeniable. They moved as one now, a force that made even seasoned war leaders pause. When the enemy came, they came in numbers beyond counting. Iron ships rolled over the dunes. Marching legions blackened the horizon. Jack didn't flinch. He knew numbers meant little if those numbers could not move, could not feed, could not trust their own eyes in the blinding sands. The first victories were small but bloody. Patrols ambushed and annihilated. Water convoys disappeared into the night. Morale chipped away, one cut at a time. Jack launched an audacious strike on the enemy's central supply depot, not to steal, but to destroy. Fires raged so bright that night, it looked as if the stars themselves had fallen. But still the invaders pushed forward, relentless and angry. In a desperate counter, Jack and Kaara hatched a plan so risky even the boldest Arcal warriors hesitated. They would bait the enemy into the Death Canyons, a maze of narrow, unstable cliffs known only to locals. A single misstep could bury entire armies. Kaara led the fake retreat, taunting the enemy, drawing them into the trap. Jack waited atop the cliffs with charges set by hand, their fuses burning slowly. As the enemy's main force thundered into the canyons, Jack gave the signal. Explosions ripped through the stone. Cliffs collapsed. Dust and rock buried machines and men alike. Panic spread faster than flames. Kaara and her warriors struck then, swift and brutal, from the heights and shadows. They dismantled what remained of the enemy with terrifying efficiency. By dawn, The once mighty Imperial force was shattered, leaving nothing behind but shattered armor and broken dreams. The Arcal had not just survived. They had crushed an empire. That night, the tribes celebrated harder than ever before. Songs were sung of the battle, of Jack the Cunning, and Kaara the Unbreakable. Jack sat alone for a moment at the edge of the firelight, watching the stars again. Kaara approached, her eyes reflecting the fire's glow. "You said you weren't going anywhere," she said. Jack looked at her, heart heavy and full at the same time. "And I meant it," he said. Without words, she sat beside him, their shoulders touching lightly. The desert was no longer just a battlefield. It was home. The galaxy beyond might rage and shift, but here, among these fierce people, Jack had found something few ever did. Family. And any who came to threaten it again would find not barbarians waiting in the sands, but warriors led by a human who had tamed not just a people, but the impossible itself. Seasons changed, and the desert bloomed with a life few outsiders ever saw. What had been scattered tribes were now a thriving nation. Trade caravans passed through under the Arcal banners. Villages grew into towns. The once endless wars between clans became friendly tournaments, honoring old traditions without the bloodshed. Jack had thought he would always be a wanderer. Now he was something more. A leader, a legend, a part of something larger than himself. The outside galaxy, however, did not forget. Rumors spread of a desert empire led by an impossible coalition. Whispers traveled through mercenary halls and government chambers, a human leading the wild Arcal. Some scoffed, others worried. One day, a sleek foreign ship landed beyond the dunes. Diplomats from the United Confederation, humanity's own sprawling power, stepped out cautiously, weapons holstered but within easy reach. They had finally come looking for Jack. He met them at the gates of the capital. He wore Arcal armor now, practical and battle-worn, adorned with feathers and carved symbols. At his side stood Kaara, her gaze sharp as any blade. "You've made quite the mess, Jack," the diplomat said with a nervous laugh. "The Confederation would like to discuss matters." Jack studied them for a moment. The man before him reeked of politics, alliances traded like coins, promises broken without a second thought. Jack remembered that world, the cold indifference behind polished smiles. "I belong here," Jack said simply. The diplomat hesitated. "You're a citizen of Earth. You have obligations." Jack smiled without humor. "My only obligation is to my people." Behind him, the Arcal warriors, once feared as savages, stood proud and ready. They needed no translation. Loyalty was a language they all understood. The diplomats left empty-handed. As days turned to years, the Arcal expanded under Jack and Kaara's leadership. They forged new alliances, mastered new technologies without losing the soul of their traditions. They became a force to be reckoned with, wild, free, and utterly unbreakable. Jack never sought a crown, but the people named him war chief anyway. Kaara stood beside him not just as his partner in battle, but in life, their bond sealed by fire, blood, and love. He looked at the new horizon they had built together. It wasn't easy. It wasn't simple, but it was theirs. And somewhere beyond the stars, powers that once dismissed the Arcal as nothing more than a footnote in history now planned carefully, nervously, remembering what had happened when they underestimated one human, and the fire he had lit in the hearts of a people once thought untamable. The desert winds carried the stories, whispered across galaxies. The human who had beaten the wild daughter. The human who had defied empires. The human who had changed everything. And when the next threat would come, because it always did, the galaxy would remember. Never challenge a people who have something worth fighting for. And never, ever underestimate the humans standing among them.